Hello, and welcome to the Special Needs Sibling Podcast, where we talk about what life is really like as a sibling to someone with special needs. I'm your host, Charlene, and today our guest is Allie. Welcome to the podcast.
Hello. I'm like, as you're saying that, I'm almost wishing that I was back at my parents' house with just the boys just like moaning and yelling in the
Aww.
background. I was like, that would have been a perfect intro. But no, I'm in my quiet Brooklyn apartment today, which is definitely, a weird feeling, but we'll get to that when we talk
Yeah,
about it,
oh
all
yeah, I'm
right?
sure it's gonna come
Okay,
out.
we'll
And
get to
yeah,
that.
but that's the fun part. It's kind of like, I feel like as we're adults, and then people are. I think the majority of people I have talked to don't live with their siblings anymore in the
Yes.
same place. Yeah, so it's
Okay.
an interesting thing to kind of look back and what we're like now, what they're like now, what it was like,
Totally.
and then kind of all the evolution things.
Yep.
Um, so could you tell us about your family, like birth order, how many siblings you have, who's disability,
Yeah.
etc.?
Yeah. So I am the oldest of four. Um, I can start to laugh about it because it's like, here we go. Here's
Yeah,
the story.
yeah, exactly.
Um, I'm the oldest of four, but I have to remember I'm telling it to you. I'm not like gearing up to tell someone like a shark attack story.
No, yeah,
Um,
yeah,
I,
exactly.
so so I'm the oldest of four. I have three autistic brothers underneath me. So I have Michael, who is, if he's 29. I have Anthony, my middle brother, who is 24, and Luke, my youngest, who is 22. Confirming those ages in my head right now with the years, but I think that's where we're
But at
at
least
now.
you're probably close
Yeah,
enough where
yeah, we're all like 2 years apart, and then there's that 7 years between me and Anthony, so I'm like, it's
yeah,
just
so
a
you have to
lot
kind
to
of do
keep
the
up with.
reverse math. Yeah.
Yeah, but, it's the 4 of us and then my parents are still together. They've been married for, like, 36 years. They just celebrated, like, their 36th anniversary,
Oh, that's
something
exciting.
wild, last
Yeah.
a couple weeks ago. But yeah, that's the order, that's the run of show in my house. I will say, and like I say this in my story a lot, like the spectrum is kind of perfectly represented under my roof, just because all three of the boys fall so differently on the
Yeah,
spectrum.
I was just gonna ask, I mean, there's gonna be some overlap just because, you're the same family, and there's certain things that
Sure.
will overlap no matter what. But yeah, so they're all kind of all over the place on the spectrum on top of all the other things.
Yeah, exactly. So
Interesting.
Michael, my oldest, is completely nonverbal. He's the lowest functioning, and I said this before, and like I want to preface this, like I say low functioning because, and I know that this is like a controversial kind of way to label people, low
Mm-hmm.
functioning, high functioning. Like
Yeah.
with this story coming out, one thing I want to make super clear for not just me, but also for siblings who grew up in our situation. Like I was
Mm-hmm.
6 years old. Like I remember where I was 4 when my oldest was diagnosed, but, like, I was 6 when I remember really starting to, like, talk about it and fundraising, and it's like, this is something that's been in my brain for over 25 years, and
Yes.
it's like high functioning, low functioning, like, sometimes things just need labels, like, that, and that's what makes it easy to kind of describe my situation. So I definitely will say high functioning and low functioning a lot, when I'm referring to my brothers, but that's just because that's how it was referred to when I was, being raised and when all this was, kind of laying out in
Yeah.
my brain.
Yeah, and
Um,
on yeah, I
go
was gonna
ahead,
say
go
on
ahead.
top of that, it was also very different in the 90s when people didn't we didn't they didn't have other terms at that time. Like now it's
Exactly.
very different because obviously there's more people who are diagnosed, all of those people have gotten older, there's kind of more medical,
Totally.
there's actually terms that you can use because there's even people when I talk to them, their sibling was diagnosed in the 80s, and that was a whole
Right.
different
Oh,
era. It's
yeah.
different because
Well,
there's
there's
stuff that they'll talk about that's completely irrelevant now. But yeah, so
right.
I
Well,
think just in the 90s, yeah.
they'll still say retard or, like, things like that. Like, that's it,
Yeah, so it's just a
like, that's
different decade of
totally.
things.
Totally.
Yeah.
I did have someone say to me recently because I posted on, the SibNet group, and I think that's probably how we kind of got connected. Um, I didn't know how to refer to it, and someone said high needs or like increased needs, and I was reading this comment, and I was like, "Give me a break." Like, no, no, we're gonna go with high and low functioning here. So, long story long, my oldest is My oldest is completely nonverbal and very low functioning, so he really just kind of sits up in his room and, like, watches, old Disney movies, old Barney movies, sing along songs. He lost his sight completely in 2008 because he was nonverbal. He couldn't really tell us, like, "Hey, guys, I can't really see," and that
Oh, that's terrible.
it happened over like probably a period like 6 months to a year, and his optic nerve is completely dead, so he has no sight,
Oh,
no chance of getting it back.
wow.
So that's a second sense gone, can't see, can't speak.
Yeah.
And he's also epileptic, so he's on medication for
Oh, on
that.
top of that. Oh my
So he
gosh.
really is like he has it the worst in our house for sure.
Okay.
But he is also like the gentlest, the sweetest, like
Oh.
the most calm, like he
Yeah.
really like gentle is the best way to describe him. Like when he touches you, everything is so light. Um, then you have, Anthony, my middle brother, who thinks he's the star of the show. He is very high functioning, socially. Uh, I wanna be careful in saying that because he has a significant level of OCD, which makes it really hard for him to function socially as well, but he's
Oh,
very
sure.
socially aware. He's the
Yeah.
one that I have, like, the closest relationship to because he talks, so we talk on the phone, we
Oh,
talk on
okay.
FaceTime, like, we can actually have a relationship. He
Yeah.
loves music and he loves to dance, but his OCD definitely makes it super hard to just kind of, like, just, live a normal life. Like, he definitely
Yeah.
has behaviors for sure.
Yes. Okay.
Um then I have Luke, the baby, who is kind of like in the middle. He's like a mix of Michael and Anthony, whereas like he's
Okay.
very gentle and very well behaved like Michael. He's verbal like Anthony, but only when he wants to be. So like you really have to get him to talk. You have to say like "Hi, Lukey," like,
Oh, okay.
and he'll a whole sentence, but like he's never unprovoked unless he really wants something like popcorn.
Yeah.
Um, but for the most part, he's kind of like smack in the middle, but I do think he's probably the smartest of all of them.
Interesting.
Um, and he's
Okay.
the most well behaved, like, you tell him to do anything and he does it immediately,
All right.
so that's my circus. I like to call it, Allie's House of Autism, because
Oh, yeah.
as a
Yeah.
writer, I definitely love a little alliteration, so
Yeah. That
uh,
I was like, that's such an interesting kind of mix too. As a general statement, like you're all yeah, that's
Well,
a
I
yeah.
have to make a joke out of everything. I think that's the only way for me to, like, get through because it gets
Yeah.
uncomfortable, like, I'm sure like,
Yeah.
especially with, I think, the severity of my situation, like, people really don't know how to handle, hearing that info, so for
Yeah.
me, delivering it with humor is the only way because it may like, you feeling uncomfortable makes me feel uncomfortable, like,
Right,
pity,
yeah. Yeah.
like, all
Yeah.
of that, but then also, like, if people were to act like it's not a big deal, then it's also annoying, so it's like, it's a
Yeah, cause
delicate.
like, would you rather be insulted or annoyed? And it's like, you gotta have to pick out of the two, which is like I mean, which is like the unfortunate thing, which is like hopefully like given more time with just like the way that people can be educated and just meet more people and hopefully that will change over time. But yeah, it's a very fine line and I feel like
Mhm.
as a sib versus a parent, it's a very different thing. Right, because it's a parent that you're kind of like I don't know. It's just there's a different. You just take it very different when your friends
Yeah.
respond and stuff. It's just not. It's not the
It's
same
so
thing.
interesting. I was with my best friend yesterday or a couple days ago, and she just had another baby. She's had 2 kids now, and,
Okay.
she was telling me about how she was at her nephew's baseball game and how he wasn't doing so well and just, like, the internal worry and, like, she was like, "I thought sports were supposed to be fun, and now I'm realizing." She's like, "I'm sitting there watching, like, my aunt and uncle, like, stressed and as I'm listening to her say this, I'm like, "This is how I felt my whole life."
Yep.
Like, with my brothers, like,
Yeah.
just, like, always, like, stressed and afraid that, like, something is gonna go wrong or that, like, someone's gonna say something to them or whatever, and it just kinda had me thinking like, of course I'm being, it's my best friend, I'm being there supportive, I totally
Oh
hear you,
yeah,
but it
right, yeah.
had me in the back of my mind knowing that I was coming on to talk to you, and I was just like, wow, like there are so many people that have never known anything different, like, never really got to be a kid
Yeah.
themselves. Like I never got to experience anything with innocence.
Yeah, and it's interesting because then I think I had something similar had happened like probably a couple years ago at work or something, and it was like I had never realized that I was just living on stress and adrenaline. Like you, because you don't like, in real time when you live with them, you don't know it. And then
Exactly.
so we fast forward, right? Like I move out, and then at some point I was with people and they were so stressed out, and I was like, I don't. And it was at a point where I realized what the difference was, and I was like, I don't. Do you know that you feel that way? And it was it was this weird like out of body
Yes,
experience where I was like, I know how you feel, but like you you seem like not only are you stressed, but you're like making a big deal that you're stressed. Right, and it's like it's
hmm,
such a weird because I'm like, but that
yes,
was norm. That was
right.
our normal for
Oh
20 plus years, right? And it's so fascinating to watch other people kind of.
yeah,
I mean, not panic, but a little bit, just because
totally,
it's
totally.
so. But then it makes you realize because I was talking to somebody else, we were talking about how the fact that it takes so much more for us to be stressed also means like
Yeah.
the threshold is higher, which is not necessarily a good thing, but it
Well,
makes
I'm
it
even
so
thinking
fascinating at the same time.
it's the like our threshold for asking for help. Like that's what it is for
Yeah.
me. Like I am realizing like my friends all the time, like when I'm super stressed or when there's something really bad going on in my life, like I kind of don't tell anybody about it or I go ghost and people are like, what's going on? Like my alley senses are going and it's kind of like
Hmm.
I physically cannot ask for help because there was no room to, or like there was room to, of course, we are growing up. Of course, your parents want you to be able to ask for help, but
Yeah.
you're watching them constantly moving and doing for the three of them that it's like, I'm not gonna give them another thing to worry about. And
Yeah.
then that carries through to all of your friendships. So it's like, yeah, my friends are stressed and they can see it, and I'm super stressed, but I'm not showing it because I'm conditioned to think that other like
Yeah.
me, like, you know what I mean? Like,
Hmm.
it's definitely, and I'm glad that you said that before. You said, survival something, and it came to popped in my head, survival mode. Like, I was
Yeah.
I was functioning on autopilot in survival mode in my parents' house until I moved out. And
Yeah. Yep.
now
Exactly. Yep.
it's a constant battle of like little Allie and adult Allie. So like
Yes. Yep.
it's am I acting in survival mode right now? Or am I like having an outer body experience, like the
Yep.
silence we talk about? Like I was just thinking, like I need to get like an Alexa or a Google or something that like starts like talk radio at like not 7 a.m. because the
Yeah.
silence alone in my house after 20, I moved out of my parents' house at 26. I'm 31 now.
Okay.
So, all these years I'm still having like an outer body experience. Like all those years growing up with Barney blasting at 6
Yep.
a.m. Like silence meant something was wrong. Silence meant
Yes.
someone ran away. Silence meant, silence meant that they moved into the group homes and now my family's never going to be the same. Like silence has never been a good sign.
Yeah.
So when you move out and now it's everyone's like, "Oh, you have peace. Oh my god, peace for
Eh,
the first time, your own
well,
life." And it's like, no.
yeah. I mean, wait. th- that's true for like an hour, right? Like
Yeah,
you could
it's
take a
not even.
shower, you could take a shower and like have a cup of coffee and in silence, and
Now
like
what?
that's fine. But once we
Yeah,
get to like your regular routine of the day, then that's when it
totally.
gets eerie. Like it feels well, and it like doesn't sit well. Like there's one thing to be
Yeah,
said of silence for people who actually just don't do well in quiet, and that's
yeah,
and I recognize now very recently that is different than what we're talking about.
100%.
And
Yeah,
and,
because
and I never knew that was different, to be honest. Like as growing up I was like, because it was just kind of this thing like, oh, it's good to like reflect when it's quiet or meditate when it's quiet or like, or all these things. And
Right.
I was like, but I don't do quiet. But I now realize it's like, no, but there is a certain level of like, oh, it's uncomfortable because you're used to like your phone and birds, traffic, whatever. But there's a
Right.
different like, but you feel alone and you know that you're alone and you're like,
Yes.
wait, something,
Yeah.
it doesn't sit right because you're like, but you
Yeah.
want to be with the people that have, yeah,
Yeah.
it's
It's
different
the
and the same,
loss
yeah, it's different,
it's the loss of identity, and that's what, like, I'm glad
yeah,
that you said, like, for a day, like, when I first moved out of my parents' house, the first 6 months, I was having the time of my life, like, I was going
yes,
crazy, but,
mm-hmm.
like, I didn't realize, was I really having the time of my life, or I was super lost and I was looking for community
Yep,
in men, in new groups of friends,
yep,
like, and then, I got myself into some shit, and then 6 months in, I crash and burn, and I realize, oh my God, like I have no identity outside of my brothers and my family
yep,
situation.
I hit that too in a different way, but I understand your
Yeah. No,
yeah,
100%. And now
yeah,
here we are like 4 or 5 years later, and I'm still trying to figure it out. Like I definitely am nowhere near where I was back then in my head. But
yeah,
and I think moving into my 30s also has definitely given me a different perspective and that
yeah,
wisdom that everyone else gets. But like it's a constant battle, and that's why I think it's so important to start having this conversation, and that's why I wanted to write my book because, like, even if
mm,
you don't necessarily have special needs, so I learned in, like, my glass children, research, because
right.
I read a whole book about being a glass child, never once hearing the term glass child. I
Oh,
hit
I heard
submit
that
on my
literally within the last 6 months is when I heard that
right,
term. I've never heard it, but I'm like, that was my life anyway. But I guess we
I
have words
know.
now to
I
illustrate
think
what's happening.
it's like someone put out like a Google ad for all the sibs and it hit us at
Yeah,
once,
exactly. Yeah,
like
100%.
so like I went back after I, submitted my manuscript and I don't mention Glass Child once in 300 pages. And I'm
Right.
watching all of these like TED Talks on being a glass child and I'm just like, "Oh my God, this is crazy." Like this is like but my point is, the glass child argument isn't just like a sibling situation, or it's not just a special needs sibling situation. It could
Correct.
be, it
Yeah.
could be your parent was sick. It's just anybody that grew up in a house
Yeah.
where they were the underdog. It's the living in the shadows. Like I don't like to
Yes.
say that Ashley Simpson, millennial girl. Like you remember that Ashley Simpson song? Like
Yes, I do.
that's that's what it is. Like, and I've had so many people reach out to me after reading my book saying like my family situation is nowhere near yours, but see so much in this, and I'm 32 and I'm still finding myself in these relationships, and I just feel like there's
Mm.
such a bigger conversation for just like I don't want to say glass children, I just want to say like maybe it's millennials, our generation, I don't know who it is, but I just
Yeah.
feel like there needs to be like a really super open conversation or dialogue is better, for people like us who like
Yeah.
might not, if you feel like you're left behind or like we don't have it all together, and it's like I think there are a lot more people out there struggling than we realize.
Yeah. And it's this thing where it's kind of like who do you talk to also,
Yeah.
right? Because
Yeah.
I'm sure you, myself, and everyone else has who has been on here, right? It's very much like you already fight battles at home, right?
Yes.
With yourself, with your sibling, with your parents, with whoever's gonna walk through your front door in public when you're with them, and it's like, how much more energy am I willing to spend
Yes.
to may or may not happen where my friend's gonna understand what I'm talking about? It's just like
Totally.
you kind of just stop caring a little bit. On
Yeah.
a certain
Yeah.
on a bad day, you just don't care, right? Because you're
Yeah,
like, I'm
disassociate.
suffering. Like, I'd rather just leave me alone,
Yeah.
right? It's not because it's just and that's what's and that's the thing, right? It's just like when you're 15 and you feel like that there's a
Oh,
couple of other things that are happening, but it's just like
yep.
the older you get, like if you really don't find even one friend, not even that's a sib,
Yeah.
right? But that's just willing to hear you out. It's like
Yeah.
it's so hard because it's like you do need community to kind of like
Yeah.
snap you back a little bit, even if it is to snap you
Yeah.
back in reality, just to, for you to like vent and just to let it out, and like, because you
Yeah.
can't internalize it forever. Like
Yeah.
that's hard.
And I think, like, that's the point, and that's the point. Like, that's why I wanna have this conversation is because,
Mm-hmm.
like, it's these kids should be reached out to. They shouldn't be reaching out looking
Mm.
for help. So, like, one thing I think, like you said, like, support groups. When I was younger, I did not
Yeah.
wanna talk about this shit. Like, this was my life.
Yeah.
Like, nothing was gonna change it. I didn't wanna go to, like, these support groups. You know, I wanted it. There was also things inside me that I didn't realize I was dealing with that were directly tied to the boys, but I thought weren't tied to the boys, you know? So
Yeah.
it like made
Yep.
it
Yep.
like made me feel bad. I've had like so many, like, since writing this book, and like I'm trying to promote it, I've definitely been talking a lot with like my brother's school and like the agencies and like the
Oh,
SIB
okay. Yeah.
networks. And
Okay.
I've tried to they want to try to get me to, or not, they want, we're trying to work together to kind of like energize the next generation of sibling advocates, because right now there's like
Mm.
the sib groups that I'm involved in with my brothers. They're all like in their 70s and 80s, and like this is like
Wow. 70s
they're
and
dealing,
80s.
and it's like these people are dealing with the logistics of being a sib. What I feel is important, like right now, what our generation of sibs needs is the support for the social side of it. We don't
Yeah.
necessarily have to worry about the finances or the services yet, because most of our parents are still alive.
Yep.
Some of us are lucky enough for them to be in group homes. Our
Yep.
generation, like, we need to learn how to figure out, how, like, number one, how do I feel okay in
Yeah.
myself? Like, how do I, number one,
Yeah.
who am I? Like, what's my
Right.
identity? Number two, like, if I have kids, are they going to be autistic? Number three, is my
Yep.
partner's family gonna be able to accept them? You know, will I ever be able to go on vacation? Like,
Right.
I really miss my brothers. Like, I can't, like, my brothers have never been to my apartment, like, because Anthony is terrified of dogs, and I live in Brooklyn where babies have been replaced with dogs. And it's
Yeah, I was
like
gonna
if I
say there's
bring
like an infinite amount of dogs in Brooklyn. Like in my even my
it's
imagination, I'm
insane.
like I imagine like six dogs like outside your window like right now.
Right.
Like
Right. But like these are things that, like, as a sib, I need to talk to about someone, because it's really frustrating that, like, I can't go out to eat in Brooklyn. Like, I can't bring my brother because someone might have their dog there and he's going to have an absolute heart attack. But
yeah.
like that's not but I can't have that conversation with just anyone, because so many people are dog lovers. Like, you know what I mean?
Right.
Like
Yeah.
there's that support. Like, I feel like there's the sibling support that, like, we need it for a certain, there's different levels, you know, like
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
our
Like
age of
categorically
people.
yeah.
Yeah, like, how can we be there for each other emotionally? I feel like our support needs to come emotionally. That's, rather than
Yeah.
logistically. It's less about, oh, I'm gonna be because I do write a lot about how, like, I'm gonna be the only one with them when my parents are gone, and that's the
Right.
loneliest feeling. And I think that's kind of like what sets the standard for that ultimate feeling of loneliness at the end of the day. Like, I don't have any
Yeah.
other typical siblings. Like, I am gonna be alone with them. But until that happens, like, what can I like focus on now? And it's like, how do I want to feel every day,
Yeah. And
you
I
know?
mean I think there's lots of hope for like this middle ground that we're talking about, cuz I mean jumping from the Sibs who are in like their 60s, 70s, 80s kind of like where they're at now, there has been an increase even like when like sib shops for younger kids, which
Right.
they might have existed when we were younger. I just never
They
I
didn't.
don't think they did, but I don't know. But then the reassuring thing is I have met sibs who run sib shops, which is
Yes.
very different than just anyone running one of those. So
Right.
and I think it's definitely like that means that there's at least people like in this gap that are seeing like, okay, hey, like it's an issue. It's just kind of like what kind of like age group
Yeah.
demographic of people are we targeting? And I think that's it. It's we'll see how long it takes, but it's at least we're moving all in that direction, because
Yeah.
obviously like the older that we all get, the more that we're all like, hey, like this is an issue, guys. Like
Yeah.
right, and I think that's kind of the also the exciting thing at the same time, because our timelines are very similar, which was like so
Yeah.
funny because we had never met till now,
Yep.
right? It's because I also because I got married and moved out at 26, right? My sister's in a group home, like then just like the
Yeah.
when you wrote your book and the timing of it is it was just so funny because we're like, wow, like this just the coincidences and
Yep.
like the
Yep.
alignment is crazy, even though like we're literally on opposite sides of the country.
Exactly.
But like,
Exactly. And
but yeah, but there's yeah,
don't even have necessarily the exact same story. And that's like one thing
right,
that I'm learning is that like with this like glass children thing, like everyone's environment can be so different, but it's the way our brains were trained
yeah,
are really so similar. Like it really,
yeah,
it's intense. It's intense. So like what I'm thinking like that we need is connection. Like it's
yeah,
not necessarily support, it's knowing other people because like when I say something and you say, "Oh my god, I feel the same way," or like when you said
yeah,
when I moved out of my house, I realized that like that shit makes me feel so much better. 'Cause,
yes,
like, I just, like, feel like I don't wanna talk about it. I don't wanna talk about it. I want someone else to say it out loud, and I wanna feel less
yeah,
bad. And
right,
I feel like that's what I want that's what we all want, Like, we don't wanna
yeah,
talk about it. We think about it enough. Like, we've been talking about it our whole lives. People have been asking us about this our whole lives.
yeah,
But, like, we haven't been telling each other. And it's like, I
yeah,
just, like, feel like I was 26, move out, losing my mind. Everyone
right,
around me is in, like, healthy relationships, and I just keep picking the same men. Like, I just keep putting everyone else before myself, and I'm like,
yeah,
why is this happening to me? Like, why is this happening? And then, like, it takes years, and then I start, like, not making connections, but doing research and hearing stories. So, like,
oh, okay,
hearing the TED Talks or whatever,
yeah,
and and then writing the book, and then being connected to you, like,
yeah,
it was hearing the stories, and then I was like, "Oh my god, like, okay, I don't feel as bad anymore." Granted, I mean, 2 days ago, I was definitely, like, crying in my room, like, I'm 31 and I operate like a 16-year-old in
oh
my
no,
head
I
because
cried the other day too, but for very different reasons. But I very much
Right,
understand your pain point. Like it's coming from
right.
all the very similar place. Yeah,
Exactly, like, everyone's stressors are different, but I think at the end of the day, all of our brains have been developed in the same traumatic
yeah,
way that we have the same approach to thinking.
yeah, and it's so much like there's so much work in general to be done on multiple levels, right? There's a lot of work that we do in ourselves to get to a point where we need to recognize
Oh,
whatever our own faults and whatever we need to do. There's work on other people's behalves where like you need to just actively listen to what I'm saying and not try to fix it or give me here's a solution of any sort, right? And then
right.
and that's just like our friends, right? Then there's all this there's like family stuff, which is a whole different dynamic of like,
Yes. Oh,
I one of the things I've learned is like acceptance of the situation that we grew up in our family is not created equal and it doesn't need to be. And I think that's something that I never really understood that till as I've been talking to people now and realizing like, like me looking at acceptance of like where my sister is at and where I'm at with my parents
oh,
and my family is gonna look one way. Like it looked one way when I was under 26. When I was living at home, it looked
yeah,
one way, and I thought it was gonna look like that forever. Right? I was very much like, I function like this. It's gonna look like this. This is how I'm gonna
yeah,
just be like this forever. It's not gonna change. And then you move out, then you're like, wow, my life is crappy, and I really, it's like it's a shit show, right? And it's this
yeah.
thing where like, that's that's not bad. It's this very much like unveiling of what the real world on the outside is, right? Because ultimately, like, even yes, we live in a world where things happen, but like you're such in a bubble with how your family operates with your sibling, no matter
Mhm.
what disability or hindrance your sibling or family has in general, right? And the thing is, like, until you are removed from it, or you're really very well connected to people who are outside that bubble, whichever is works for you, is
First, yeah.
you don't know. And so that, and then that creates this identity crisis where it's like, well, what, and that's, everyone has their own journey with their identity crisis,
Of
but all
course.
that to say, like, if we fast forward from that point, right, the acceptance of what I now see in my life with my sister and my parents, and it's very different, and I would have not imagined moving 11 and a half hours away from my sister like that. If you had told my 20-year-old self that, I would have like shot you,
Yeah, yeah,
right? Because it's
100%,
not,
100%.
that wasn't part of the picture, right? That your brain is very, not only are we kind of told these things about like, hey, your sibling's more important than you, like subconsciously, obviously, but
Yep, yep.
you also like, you internalize the caregiving thing, and I think that's why it's
Uh-huh.
such a big deal, because I'm sure, in the older siblings I've talked to, who kind of like their siblings, got diagnosed like in the 80s and before that,
Yeah.
like that's all very much what they were told, is like they're told you're just gonna take care of your sibling, because
Right.
the level of group homes and
They didn't exist.
not staff care, like the
Dayhabs.
in-home care, yeah, the level of that
Yeah.
is so much increased now
Oh,
in the
yeah,
last 20 years.
totally.
Like, it'll be
Yeah,
different by the time that our siblings are like even older. That whole next
absolutely.
generation of kids is gonna be so different.
Absolutely.
Like,
Yeah.
yeah,
It's so funny, like you say that, like, I'm thinking about, like, the group homes,
yeah,
um, and, yeah, I also, like, I think a lot of the time, like one solution like
yeah,
could have been like I feel like if someone in my family because like so you bring up the group homes and like I also have a question for you like I wrote this down before like when
mm-hmm,
you said acceptance like I wondered how once your sibling went into the group home like what that looked like for your family like
mm-hmm.
acceptance wise but um I had a whole thing I literally wanted to talk to you about, and I'm blanking on it right now.
It'll come,
Um,
I'm sure.
no, it
Yeah,
definitely will. Oh, yes. No, so I wanted to say, like that internal caregiving,
yeah.
right?
Okay, there. Yeah.
So, like, I have always like, I grew up, like, in the creative industry, like, I'm a writer, I'm a marketer, like, I
Okay.
always wanted to, like, maybe go to LA or, like, whatever.
Oh yeah.
I've I've always told myself I can't leave New York. Like, my brothers are my responsibility, I can't be far away from them.
Yeah.
And, like, my mom putting the boys in the group home was for me, right? So that I could live my own life, so that I could do what I
Yes.
want
Yep.
but I can't. Like there's no like that wouldn't feel right to me, you know? So like yeah,
Mm-hmm.
like I totally relate to what you're saying and
Yeah.
like that it's chemical, you know? It's like I
Yeah.
can't no matter how many resources there is and then that brings me to my what I wanted to ask you was
Yeah.
like when my mom put the boys into the group home, she was doing that for me because I was a sophomore in college. So like you know
Yeah.
she wanted me to feel like I had opportunity to pick a job or do whatever
Right.
but definitely there were certain family members that didn't talk to her or my dad for a year because like we're Italian and we don't do that you know we take care
Oh, I
of
see.
our
Okay.
own
Yeah.
and I know that and maybe not just and that was never like said to my parents but people
Right.
didn't talk to that like you know like you could feel the judgment and I'm sure that my parents you know felt that and when you were talking about acceptance before that's
Mm-hmm.
what I almost wondered is like I wonder if our people so like siblings who have siblings in group homes like I
Yeah.
wonder if that's another kind of like underlying thing like I definitely feel selfish because I feel like they're in the group home because I couldn't take care you know because my mom didn't
Oh, I
want me
see.
to have
Yeah.
to take care of them but at the end of the day like I'm still living a small life here like what do other people think like there's just
Yeah.
so many moving parts
Yeah.
but did
It
your family like your extended family like was that a thing when your parents put your sibling in the group home
so I'm thinking about it, and so it's so forgive my like I'm processing in real time as I'm talking to you about. So if I jump
Story
around,
of my
then
life.
but yeah,
Story of my life.
so the thing growing up with my extended family is that when we had larger like family gatherings, so, like Christmas, Thanksgiving, all those big holidays and stuff. So the thing is
Yeah.
like my parents would always go late.
Yes.
Like it's not like we would cuz sister can't do all that for
Yep.
that long of a period. Not before. She probably could now, but yeah, when they're young, they're just running
Yeah.
around and all this stuff is happening. So like I don't real like I feel like all of my extended family like they know about Angela and like they're aware of certain things, but I don't know how like well they really understand it. And so
Sure.
the thing is as we got older, it's kind of like we didn't always go to them, or even if we did, right, by that time
Right.
that I had met my husband, so then I was like, I was just at his family all the time. I'm like, his family seems happier, so I'm just gonna
Yeah.
go. I'm gonna go
Yeah.
where I feel better and not feel like I'm like in a
Right.
box. And so but so when they found her housing, so they found her housing in 2017,
Okay.
and then she moved in like 2021, but that's when they like decided where they were going to put her was kind of like in the
Sure.
2017 range. And so I feel like most people, because of the situation of like how they got the housing and stuff like that, most people are pretty like, oh, that's so cool. Um, so my how do I phrase this? Acceptance issues were having to deal with that in my inside
Yeah.
feelings, I felt like my parents cared more about the housing than me because it
Sure.
became this very very all consuming. We're gonna go here, we gotta go to this meeting, we're gonna do this, we have to make sure she's adjusted, but like it was very much like they like that was like the third child because it's just me and Angela. So the
Yeah.
housing was like the third child, right? And I'm like, well,
Yeah.
I so it's like her living in the housing was fine. Like I like that was like I'm like great, I'm out.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it gave
Yeah.
me it very similar to how like you felt like you could. There's part of you that is like, oh, I'm released, right? There's obviously a different part of you that's connected, but the
Right.
part of me that was released, I was like, I can move now, and that was a very big deal. Like I did feel like the
Yeah.
relief of like, oh, I am not obligated by force to stay. And
Yeah.
that's a very big deal, but at the same like but my acceptance thing was not that because she's in a great place. Like I like the people she lives with and I've met all those family stuff and they're great people and I have no issues with
Right.
that, but inside my family I'm like that housing is still like it's an issue of my
Yeah.
acceptance of like, well, we which is like it's the elephant in the room, right? Like, am I really gonna bring that up and fight with my parents? No. Like, what
No.
are you gonna
Yeah.
do? Complain? What am I gonna do? Complain that my sister's
Yeah.
in a good housing, but I'm just over here. You still forgot about? I'll be like, no, I'm not gonna have that
Yeah.
conversation, right? Because
Yeah.
it's
No.
right, cause, like
Exactly.
what we were talking about earlier, right? Like, it's not worth it. And
Yeah.
really, the only people who I'm willing to tell that to, I mean, well, now it doesn't matter because I'm recording it, but like, but right while it's happening, right?
Yeah.
It's like my husband knew,
Right.
that's it. Right? And if I didn't have
Yeah.
him,
Totally.
no one would know.
Yeah. No.
Right? Like
Absolutely.
it's very like
I
it's
feel the
such
same.
like
I feel the same way. Like
yeah.
I don't like to talk about like even now like I wrote the book and now people want to talk about it and I'm
I
like,
was gonna ask you how you're
I
feeling
wrote
about all that, but like clearly
I'm like I wrote the book for a reason. Like go do it. Go read it there. Like I don't want to
yeah.
talk about this anymore. Like
Yeah.
it's like funny like when you said that before like I just like wrote it down cuz obviously
Yeah.
my memory's shot
Right.
like from trauma. Like
yeah, for sure, 100%.
I felt when the boys went in and I don't know, maybe so my brothers went in. I graduated college 2014. They went in when I was a sophomore, so like around 2012 ish, 2012, 2013. They've been in for 10 years. I
Yeah.
don't know if it's because I was still like 23 at the time or 22, whatever I was at the time, like,
Mhm.
but I didn't feel freer. I felt lost. Like I felt
Mm.
it felt like a death. And I think that's because like when I went away to college, I was in college. Like it was
Yeah,
different.
that's
Like
that's your
and I
own milestone that you've hit,
right.
like,
I
yeah.
mean, not that I was still having those like the little peaks of the identity crisis started
Yeah.
happening in college. Like my major mental health issues
Okay.
really started happening in college when I was away. But
Okay.
then when they went into the group home and I started coming home on breaks,
Mm.
now there was no refuge because it was like, all right, I went away to college, so it was like I was like kind of slowly weaning myself off. Went away to college, I would come home, back to the chaos, back to the circus. I would feel like myself again. You know, I the first year of college, I went somewhere else, and I was coming home every weekend because I just felt
Yeah.
so out of place. And then, you know, sophomore year, I go to a new school. They go into the group home, and now
Yeah.
I'm coming home. So now I'm feeling alone at school, and then I come home and the boys aren't here and it feels like they died, but they didn't die. They're still here and like
Yeah.
but like I'm my parents are sad. I can't show that I'm sad because this is
Right.
ultimately hardest for them and they were making this decision for me, so I
Yep.
should be
You
grateful.
should be appreciative and, like,
I should
thankful and
feel
all of these
grateful.
insert word here, like, yeah, for
Right,
sure. Yep.
right. And
Mhm.
then that was when I realized like where is home? Like,
Yeah. Yep.
I feel
Yep.
like I lost my home, and
Yeah.
ever since then, I don't think I ever got it back. Like, I'm still trying to like, I think now, like, the apartment I have in now, this is my 3rd apartment, and
Yeah.
I've been in therapy for 3 years, and I've been through 2 really traumatic relationships, and, like,
Yeah.
I think I'm finally now feeling like home is where I am, but
Yeah.
there was so many years that I felt like home was where my brothers were, and then I started going to therapy, and then would go home to visit my family on the weekends when the boys are home from the group homes, and
Yeah.
I felt that didn't feel right anymore. Because then I started feeling, like, resentful, like, "Oh, all of this shit I'm learning in therapy about myself and why
Yep.
I'm so messed up, and I don't wanna resent them because they're quite literally disabled and have no control, but I'm really not
But
trying to be around you
that's
guys right
also
now,
part of
like."
it though. Like that is part of it.
Right,
Like as and I was very confused about that too when I was in therapy and going through that part of it, like what cuz one of the first not first things, but very early on I was like the way that I felt ashamed of Angela, right?
right,
And I was very confused. I cried a lot about it, and I was like, I don't get it, right? Because I'm like, I've spent the better of like 20 plus years being fine, right? Like,
right.
whatever. But one of the things that I'm still working through it, right, is like, that is part of it is like not being in denial, right?
Yeah,
Because there is, and I mean, it's this very strange feeling because it's like, why would I be resentful or ashamed if like they're your brother or your sister? Like you love them
yeah.
and just all these things, right? But at the same time, right? Like you can't say that like my life wasn't affected, right?
No, of
It's
course.
not like I got a pet goldfish and the goldfish was disabled. You know what I mean? Like it's my whole life was impacted for the better and worse at the same
Yeah.
time. But it's like it was such a hard. I was very confused. Kind of
Yeah,
like
yeah.
right, but I think,
But
but I
you
also
didn't
think
realize it
it's
until now.
yeah, exactly.
And
Not until I was a
that's what's
yeah,
fucked, like, you
yeah,
know,
yeah.
it takes a minute to, like I say all the time, and I'm actually curious if you
Mhm.
feel differently because you are married, like, I have a very hard time going home on the weekends to see my family because it feels like a time machine, like, it's all you know how they say, like, you can't heal in the place that you were hurt? Like,
Yes.
sometimes I feel like when I go back to my parents' house, like, and my brothers are there, like, nothing has changed. Like, my mom, everyone's still in their
Yeah.
pajamas all day because there's literally no energy to get them all dressed. My mom is feeding three separate breakfasts, and then once the last one is done with the breakfast, and she starts making lunch for the next three, and
Yeah.
it's like same shower routine. And I come home, and
Yeah.
I'm not in a new like I sometimes I feel like my career, I have such a great career, but I don't have a relationship or my own family. And I
Yeah.
think that that's like this whole sibling situation has seriously affected that portion of my life. And like,
Yeah.
and I think that's why I pour so much into my career, why I'm so successful in that side.
Mm.
But like when I go home, I feel like I feel like that kid again. I feel like I'm in a time machine and like
Yeah.
it's fucked up. Like the only times I feel
Yeah.
good going back to Long Island, being in my parents' house, is when I'm in a relationship. And it's
Yeah.
even if I'm in a really toxic bad relationship because like
Mm.
it feels like, oh, here I am finally with my own life. Like
Yeah.
I don't know, like, I wonder, like, because 'cause you're married, like, do you feel like you found, like do you feel like you've, like, found your own life or, like, you've made I think that's maybe what I am missing now I've realized, "Okay, I found my identity, but now I
Mm.
need to find my family." I don't
Oh, I see
know.
what you're saying. Yeah.
I
So
feel
I
very
guess,
alone.
yeah, I guess I'll start from the time machine part, and then I'll kind of like work my way
Yeah,
to like where I'm at now. So I 100% am with you in the time machine thing. Like I can, and what's crazy is like I don't even have to be in my parents' home to feel it. Like I will just be in their presence
yeah,
with my sister, and it's like bam, like you're 12.
yeah,
There's
totally.
no like, yeah. So I definitely feel that whether or not I'm like, yeah, what space we're in, but if we're just in the same like vicinity, I'll feel it.
Right,
So when I was, what was it? So yeah, either when I was dating my husband, so I was still living at home. My solution to that was I would just hang out at his house and
right, right.
all the time and just crash there because I was like, it's easier.
Yeah,
Um, so I would do that. That was kind of my way out at that time. So when I got married, so then I was out all. So that one was hard because that was very much like, okay, I have my own life, but I'm adjusting to being married, but I'm in the time machine, and like WTF.
yeah, yeah,
Right?
totally.
And it was that because like for multiple reasons, and part of it's an aging, part of it's a therapy thing, but there are various things. But a
Sure.
lot of it was like, you know how like when we were like 10 and you had all those very confusing feelings about being a sib, but you didn't realize it was that. So like the thing was, I had that again, but like
Yeah,
in that
the second
in
coming.
that's yeah, and I would be crying all the time out of
Mm.
anger, like had no reason why. My husband's like, "What's wrong?" I'm like, "I have no idea." Right,
Yeah,
but I
yeah,
could feel, I just felt everything, and it was so hard. And so it was this thing where, so that's like what got me to start going to therapy was like kind of that all together.
yeah,
And so I think one of the things like as I was going to therapy, it's this thing where for my identity, I had a very hard time with it because I was so attached to being my parents' daughter, being my sister's sister, and like being this
right.
person who did all these things in this order and being organized. Like, it's very much like I could very much lay out who I was, and it's
And not
like,
mention yourself at all.
right, yeah, yeah, definitely not. And so it's just like, well, so I'm working through that. I'm working through anger, all this stuff, and so eventually I get to, what is it? So we fast forward. Oh, so then we get to the pandemic. I guess we'll just jump from there to
Yeah.
that point in time. So I will say, thank God I was not living at home with my parents and my sister during the pandemic. I would have just moved
Oh,
out
yeah,
of
yeah.
sheer will or something. Like I would not there for various reasons. Well, you understand, but yeah,
Yeah, of
yeah.
course.
Like I couldn't do it. So I'm very thankful that I was not in their home at that time. But I think that it wasn't the pandemic that did it, but it was just because at that time we were also looking like, okay, if we wanted to buy a
Sure.
house at some
Yeah.
in some form, right? And so when we did all these math, we did all the math, and we did all these had these conversations, and it was very much, and part of that conversation was my sister at that point was gonna move in like 6 months or a year or whatever, right?
Yeah.
So I knew that her housing was solidified. So I was like, we could move. And I think like it's this interesting thing where after we moved, it's very much like I have like space to like figure out all the things.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like cuz I'm being left alone. I don't have to
Yeah.
I can choose who I want to talk to. Like, and I love my friends, right? But there are people in the time machine thing where you're just like,
You
you're
have to.
not quite worth the effort for me to like spend the energy versus kind of some other friends who are more, kind of what we're talking about, like
Yeah.
they're willing to listen to kind of like what our
They get
story
it.
is and like and be there. And I think like that was a very having the space to like kind of sit in silence and not be
Yeah.
panicky, right? Because it took me a long time. The thing that it's the silence plus the me being alone in a house of any sort, even if there are people there. Because
Right.
my thing growing up was like, so my sister, she wasn't loud, um, but the thing was like, I don't know how I'm gonna explain this properly. I'm gonna try, but like,
Yeah. Of
so my problem is like, I felt alone, even though there were people in the house.
course.
Right. And so my issue was like if you're in the house but like you're asleep in a different space, like I like have like separation anxiety or something. That's not quite what it is, but that's just to
Sure.
illustrate it. Right. And so that was my thing. And so when I was here, I was like, wait, like I'm now in this big house and like what do I do? And so but it's interesting because kind of when you were talking about like finding home and like you moving apartments and stuff, right? Like I realized that like the physical space isn't going to solve everything, but I did
No.
recognize that if you do enjoy your physical space, that helps
Space.
a lot with
Yeah.
like the safety net, and that
Of course.
creates a closer like it like the step is
Yeah.
larger towards kind of
Absolutely.
finding your like the family part of it. And I think like I'm very fortunate where my husband when he interacted like I mean obviously being a sibling and the dating world is a whole other fiasco, I'm
Right.
sure, as you probably already know that. But I think I was very fortunate that he like when we were talking about it, he was willing to understand it, and when he met her,
Right.
that's like a whole other story. But like that's
Yeah.
but I think it was very fortunate that those things aligned. And I know that that's unfortunately not everyone can have that, but
Yeah.
it's a very like I, yeah, I think that is part of it. For me personally, I think my husband helped a lot with the navigation of my
Right.
identity crisis.
Sure.
Yeah, and it's kind of like this. It yes, and I'm trying to like I'm like hearing your question in my head. I'm like I am answering it, but I'm not answering it at the
Well, no,
same time. But like I
I love what
yeah,
I totally get it, and I'm actually finding I'm like I feel like this is a therapy session because I'm
I
also
know, I know.
finding
I was
answers.
like, but this
I'm
is great though.
finding
I'm glad we
answers that
have
I
each
need right
other.
now.
Like
Yeah,
yeah.
I don't know if you caught that, but that was me asking you to like help me like figure this shit out.
No, I
So
did.
like I'm like
But that's why I'm
I'm like
like, I don't mind sharing my story. But that is a genuine thing, right? Because it's like,
yeah,
you could ask your therapist that, but that's different than asking a sib,
yeah,
right? And I
yeah,
get that. Like, I
exactly.
totally understand. But go on.
I love what you said though about like all those people being in your house and you still felt all alone, and like the reason for that is because all those like when I think all those people in my house, like I had the three boys, and then there would be three after school, three ABA teachers, and then at 3 or 5 o'clock they would shift, and SCO teachers would come. That's life skills. So at any given time, there was 3 to 6 teachers in my house on top of the three boys with my mom,
Yeah.
and I always felt alone, and that's because nobody was there for me.
Yeah.
And I come into this physical space and you think, "Oh, it must be so nice to be alone." Or anytime I'm with a group of people, I still feel alone because
Yeah.
it's not for me. And when you said like it's like about like not panicking, like the reason I keep getting into these struggle relations, really, really toxic relationships is because being in this house without having anyone here for me, is
Mhm.
fucking painful, and it's
Yeah.
like, I'm tired of it. Like, I've been doing this my whole life.
Yeah.
I lived 26 years in a space where nothing was ever about me.
Mhm.
And so I move out, and now I continue that. Feels right. It feels wrong when things are about me. So I continue to get into
Mhm.
relationships where it's about the other person. The other person needs more because that's what feels comfortable,
Yeah.
you know?
Yep.
But then at the end of the day, you just keep, it's a cycle. It's a pattern, and like, here I am in this quiet apartment, and like everyone's like, "Wow, look at this nice apartment you have, and like this great life." And it's like, well, every morning and every night I'm like, who am I? Like, who's
Yeah,
there
who
for
am I? What
me?
am I?
Like,
Why am I? Like, yeah.
why?
Yeah.
Why am I like, am I
Why?
ever, sometimes I wonder if like my life is meant for other people. Like, am I
Oh
meant to
yeah.
be here
Yep, I've had
to,
that.
like, am I literally meant to be here to help heal other people? Like,
Yep.
am I ever gonna get the support, or not the support, but like the level of love that I give? And that's not a knock
Yep.
to my friends, and that's not a knock to my family, but I think that there are some things that like, that only like a really intimate relationship
Yeah.
can fill, you know? And
Yeah.
I wonder if a lot of Sibs feel the same way as I do, or if I'm just like a millennial girl living in New York City dating a cesspool of men. You know what I mean?
No, like it
Like,
it's
what is it?
yeah. No, it's tough because it's like it and it's interesting because
If your
yeah.
listeners haven't gathered by now, Sis is going through a breakup. So
Yeah.
that's where we've
Yeah.
turned this. So
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
continue.
I think part of it is well, I mean there's various things, but I think one thing is the dynamics of having more than one sibling that's disabled of any sort, really.
Right.
Right? Cuz it's one thing to ask whoever you're going to be your partner in life or temporarily whatever, right? It's one thing to say hey, like I have like a brother or sister and they have this disability. Whatever it is. It could be blindness, it could be in a wheelchair, but like whatever.
Right.
Like it could
Yeah.
be just it could be an intellectual disability, right? And that's one part and I feel like generically most people are like, "Oh, like, I can accept your luggage."
Yeah.
Fine. Whatever, right? But the issue then is oh, surprise, there's like a box and a box and a box and a box and a box. And then they go,
Mhm.
oh, just
Yep.
kidding.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
maybe that's why I deflect by, trying to find people that have more baggage than I do, just because I'm like,
Yeah.
it'll be easier for me. Like, you be the one with the problems, and then I can be the
Yeah.
fixer, as I've always
He's
been.
been, yeah.
But it's like, but then you're sitting here and you're like, holy, why do I feel so why does everyone else seem to just like wake up with some serotonin and I don't? Like,
Yeah.
you
And
know
it,
what I mean?
yeah. And it's this thing where it's like, I, I'd, I mean, I wish I had an answer to like, ding, but like,
There's
it's
none.
so hard because like, what I can tell you is that I think there are good people in the world, and I think there are people who can genuinely surprise you. Like I have met a couple
Yeah,
of people in my life where I was surprised at the level of care that they have for me,
totally.
like for
Yeah.
me, like not
Yeah.
not even all the other
Not your
crap, right?
family,
Just
not your friends, just you.
yeah, and I think like that's just that's something where I'm like like that that's normal.
Yeah,
like
totally.
like like the regular world normal, not our normal. But like and
Yeah,
I
that's
think
what it's supposed to be.
yeah, and I think that's something that I'm coming to terms with right now. It's like this thing where it's like I've put my life on hold. I've done all these things. I want to eat this for dinner, not this, and it's right. But you still go into your cabin, you open your freezer, you're like,
Yeah.
oh, but that's my
Yeah,
sister's favorite fruit. But like right, and that maybe or that may or may not ever be undone, right? But it's this thing where it's finding someone who is willing, in general, whether it's a partner or not,
Yeah.
finding someone who understands that you struggle with what you want versus what your subconscious is telling you because of muscle
Totally.
memory is very, like,
Yeah.
that's just hard.
It's
Right?
a
Even
it's a constant battle.
finding friends who do that is already like
Right,
hard
right.
enough, let alone
Well,
like the
it's
person you want to spend the rest of your life with, you know?
totally,
Like,
totally. Well,
yeah.
I should also be grateful, and I'm sitting here and I'm like, "Oh god, Allie, you're making it dark again. You're bringing it yeah,
Nah, we
this
do
is
that. We're
getting
good at
this
that.
is getting
I've
dark,
been that
Allie."
person for years. Yeah,
But
I've been that person for a long time.
I have to remind myself, like, as you're saying this, like, no,
Mhm.
you're right. Like, no, I haven't found an intimate relationship that's done that for me, but I have in the last 5 years
Yeah.
have found a incredibly supportive group of girlfriends who are
Mhm.
who feel like they're raising me sometimes.
Oh, that's
And that's
amazing. I'm
no
so happy for
and
you.
that's
That's
no
no
knock to my
short, like,
parents.
there's no short stick. Yeah,
Yeah,
no, that's
there's
amazing.
like it's no knock to my parents, but like there's some things that I just feel like it's too late for my parents. Like
Yeah.
I was a kid
Yep.
and these were things that I would only be able to listen to them as a child. And
Yes, yep,
I'm in
I'm
my
there.
30s now and I'm
Yep.
not going to like it just doesn't make sense. I don't want to listen to them also because we don't live the same life. Like I say to my parents all the
Yeah.
time like my parents had me when they were 30. They had my
Yeah.
brother when they were 32. So my parents got to live a normal life for 30 years. Like
Yeah.
I didn't. I don't know anything else.
No,
So
right, yeah,
like
yep.
sometimes I as much as I feel like my parents are the only people on this world who could understand what I go through, they
No,
actually can't
absolutely not.
because
Absolutely not.
they had a childhood. My parents met each other
Yeah.
and, like got to be kids. I didn't. So it's like I
Yeah.
one thing I have to be so grateful for is like my friends' patience with me. Like
Yep,
I
yep,
these
yep.
last few years like they've had to deal with me going through a lot of shit in just like
Mhm.
relationships and depression and just
Yeah.
like trying to find my way. And you're
Yeah.
right, like my friends are the ones that are are teaching me that I am worth it, and that's
Yeah, and
important to
that's
remember. I have to
yeah, it's
remember that.
so valuable. And I will say, like, as females just like on the planet, like regardless of the sib thing, like female friendship and mentorship is so important. And that's
So
completely on
important.
a different topic, but it's so important. And it especially just because you have three brothers, that's like even more so, right? Because you're kind of like, oh, you're mom, but you're not
Extreme.
mom, but you're older sister, right? But it's so
Yeah.
important to have other women who tell you you matter and to really
Yeah.
cultivate like it's okay that you cry and you're upset about this and it's okay you
Yeah.
make your own choices, right? And having like another woman affirm that and a group of women who affirm that,
Totally.
it's that is so much healthier than trying to find a significant other to do that, right? And I'm very fortunate that my
Totally.
husband was able to do that, and I've been good groups of people. But I will say, like, from a healing standpoint, like that's so valuable that you have that group that's willing to kind
Totally.
of like, and they're gonna be your safe haven from whoever is gonna try to bombard
Have
you
been.
with whatever, like, and
Have
that's
been. They
amazing to
truly
have
have.
people who really can safeguard you in a way that's healthy for you, like
Yeah.
that's invaluable, and that's
Yeah, it
great,
is.
yeah.
It makes me actually sad thinking now about and this is so off brand for me because
uh-huh.
I am a good morning ladies and disappointments type of girl, but like the men like they are like their friendships from what I feel, I don't know this, maybe guys can reach out and tell us differently, but like
Yeah.
it seems like male friendships don't really get that deep, and it makes me sad for male siblings that might be in our situation, that might be in their late
Mm,
20s, early 30s, that like
yeah.
are feeling this way but really don't have anyone to talk to and probably do the same thing, take it to intimate relationships
Yeah.
because they can't, you know. It makes me wonder, and that's I think the need for this conversation in general. It's more a
Yeah.
mental health conversation, I think, and like a loneliness than it is about our siblings. It's a
Yeah,
brain thing.
it is, but the interesting thing about that as you bring that up, it's like if you only, well, I'll use the word attack. It's a little too aggressive. But if you only like address, there we go,
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
the
Yeah.
like loneliness, mental health, like it's funny because I think about like the version of myself that first started going to therapy,
Yeah.
right?
Oh my
And
god.
if I had just
Whew.
addressed like my yeah, my stress level and loneliness and stuff, like I would that that would help, but it doesn't it's not the same.
Yeah.
Like, do you know like it's important, but it's just with the Sibs, there's a whole another nuance of being a Sib compounded with loneliness. Because you can have
Yeah.
those things live separately, but
Without.
I think,
Yeah.
but in Sibs specifically, I feel like it's very much connected, but the irony is like in my a personal opinion, I feel like most Sims don't realize it till you hit 30.
Yeah.
Just and I think that could just be a multitude of factors, but
Yeah.
I think age as a Sib, like it fascinates me kind of like as I've talked to different Sibs who are kind of like in different age
Yeah.
ranges, right? It's there is a shift once you hit like kind of 29, 30. It changes. Like there's things that
Massive.
in and I don't know if that correlates to like stuff in mental health spaces where that also correlates or
Yeah.
not, right? Which that's a little sciencey for us, but like I'm sure
Right.
somebody
I
out
know.
there, if
Right.
someone knows, like let me know. Yeah, but I think that's it's so, and I think that's why, like as you were saying, like having this connection and having this dialogue, right? Like with glass children in general, it is great. Like that is important, and I think as a subsidiary of that, as Sibs, like it's really important because if all Sibs feel as lonely as we do, you know, plus or minus a couple of points, like we really need to like have this dialogue.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
I would hate for everyone that's a Sib just to go on with their life and not what right and whether they are engaging in the dialogue can be one thing, but it's kind of like what you said, right? If you just listen to someone talk about, hey, I felt this way, and you go, oh shit, like I'm not the only one who felt that way, and it's normalized, right? And that was one of the things that my when I first started going to therapy, that's the one of the first things she told me was like, we have to normalize what you feel because it is normal. You can
Mm.
you people are mad at their parents. Are
Yeah.
people are not the people like
Two
you're
things can be the same at one time. Two different
exactly.
things. Your parents did love you, but they didn't give you everything you needed.
Yeah,
That's
and
okay
we
to
can
say.
acknowledge both, and it's okay that you're sad about it, and it's okay that you're angry about it, and it's okay that you want to hate them and you want them to jump off a bridge. Like that's not wrong to
Right.
feel that like you shouldn't push them off the
Be
bridge,
on a
right?
bad
Like
day.
and there's
Right.
a threshold,
Right.
but like I think that and that's the other thing that we even I mean we've been talking about, right? But like we pick our battles so much that we won't pick the battles to feel our feelings. And that's a
Yeah.
big deal, right? And if anything, that's like the issue in the mental health space as for Sims, right? Like, right,
Yeah.
if I'm so preoccupied with like, is Andrew gonna throw a tantrum? Are my parents gonna yell at me? Are my relatives gonna
Yes.
be pissed off that we're late? Am I gonna be hungry later? Like, well, and I could have chosen to say, had I known the language, I'm overwhelmed and I would like a hug. Right? Cause right, right,
Oh my god! Crack the code. That
right,
is
like
it.
really,
That's
like
all.
that's what I needed. I just wanted to come and someone to come over to me, say Charlene, like, hey, this is
Yeah.
overwhelming. I'm sorry you feel this way. Here's a snack. We're gonna spend time together, and it's gonna be okay. And
Here's
acknowledge
a
that I feel
snack.
overwhelmed, and then move on. Like that's what I needed, but
Yes.
I didn't know that. They didn't know that. I can't
Yeah.
vocalize it, so I've spent years not saying that. So now I say it all the time.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, as
I
as
say like, hey, like I need to just but it's so easy to not say that.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
so easy
Well,
to just
especially
like,
when you're a little kid too, like how are you supposed to
yeah.
know? And this was one of the conversations I had with somebody else recently saying
Mm-hmm.
like, "Oh, I understand why they say it takes a village to raise a kid, but
Right.
when the kid is autistic, the village disappears because everyone's
Yeah.
afraid, "Oh, I don't know how to do it." And it's like, "Well, actually, a lot of the times I think about, like, if there was one aunt, one uncle, my grandparents, if anyone, like, because my grandparents were so overcome with grief about
Mm,
their
yeah.
3
That is
disabled
tough.
grandkids,
Yeah.
that they didn't, it's like I was literally invisible to almost every, it feels
Everyone.
like,
Yeah.
or not, because I kept it so together and because I was so good with the boys and I was so independent, everyone thought, "Oh, Allie's got it." And it's like,
Yep, yep.
if there was one adult that would have given me a snack, given me
Yeah!
a hug
Yep.
without me having to ask, like there were adults
Yes!
that would do that after I had a public meltdown because someone was staring at the boys and I had a blowout
Yep.
fight with an adult. Like they would do those things for me in those moments when I was having a meltdown, but preventatively. Like it would have been so much easier if they,
Yeah.
preventatively would have been there for me,
Yeah.
But I feel like funny you said something before, and I wrote it down. Like, I feel like I am constantly battling between wanting to be seen and wanting to be invisible. It's
Yeah.
like my whole childhood, I wanted to be invisible, like outwardly. I wanted to be invisible. I didn't want anyone to look at us because
Yeah.
the more eyes on us, the more
Yeah,
traumatic
the
this
word exactly.
scenario is going to
Yep.
be. But
Yep.
I so badly wanted to be seen inside, right?
Yes.
I so
Yep.
badly wanted people to notice me, notice Allie. And now outwardly, I have such bad social anxiety because of all the shit that we went through in public
Yeah.
growing up with them. Outwardly, I want to be invisible again,
Yeah.
but so badly, like when I'm not seen, I start having tantrums. Like
Yeah.
it's just so interesting. It's just a constant back and forth.
No, yeah. Sometimes I ask my husband like, "Do you feel like you're raising a child?" Because like what we were talking about earlier, right?
Yes.
Because there's times, and I mean we talk about it a lot, but I do feel bad about it sometimes, and other times I'm like, I do feel bad, but like in the grander scheme of things, what I'm doing now and asking him to do is a vast improvement from what like much earlier on in a relationship where I would literally throw tantrums. Where I would just
Yeah.
scream, I would cry
Yeah.
like for no reason, and I
Yeah.
think the the one of the greatest tools of therapy, which there's many, but one of the biggest thing is being able to use words to communicate how I feel. Right, the feelings
Yeah.
wheel is great. Like I just have it in my house because there's just times, and I think I didn't realize how often of the time that I felt anxious for various reasons, but I was like, well, why do so? Because now I can ask myself like, why do you feel anxious? Because before I would have just felt anxious and been like, oh, forget it.
Right.
And I would have like, drowned myself in homework and studying and like music, or I would have just, kind of drown out the silence thing. Like you turn up your music super loud, you go into
Yeah.
spreadsheets, you kind of just whatever, and it's like, now I'm like, okay, so and now it's funny because it's like if I feel like doing those habits, like, oh, I need to work, whatever. I'm like, no, something is wrong. I need to like
Yeah.
sit. I like
That's
grab my stuffed animal and I give it a hug, and I'm like, okay, like what's happening? Because
yeah.
I've learned that that's what I do. I mean, other people do different things, right? When they feel
Yeah.
stressed or whatever. But that I've realized like if that's something I need, like, yeah, I have to always ask myself how I feel because I'm so used to not addressing how I feel or just putting it under the radar or suppressing it, because if on the outside it looks like your emotions are more distraught than mine on from
Right.
the outside, then I will suppress and then let people please or whatever the thing is.
Right. Yeah.
Mhm.
When you said before, like, it's actually one of the first things, it's in the introduction of my book. Like, when I was a kid, I had to act like an adult. So
Yeah.
now, as an adult, I'm acting like a child. And
Yes.
I think it's super, super amazing that you are identifying those feelings and actually taking like the steps to like challenge them in the moment, because I've been in therapy for probably 3.5 years now, and I'm
Mhm.
so blatantly aware, and I could see it all so clearly, my patterns, and it
Yeah.
is
That's
so
great.
fucking hard to not, yeah, it's great, and then I do
But
nothing about it.
Oh, okay, I
It's
see.
so hard,
Okay, yeah,
and I think, like, maybe it's because of the severity of my situation,
yeah.
um, like, one thing I wanna say is that I did have something happen to me recently where I finally feel like the wall was broken down. I've been
Mm,
seeing it, I've been seeing the pattern, but I just kept
yeah.
wanting to try, just keep trying. No,
Okay,
I could do this. I could
yeah,
do this." And I just had something happen to me recently where I'm like, "Nope, no more." Like, and I really feel like I'm going to probably finally start to, in those moments, try to use the tools that therapy has given me. But it just makes me realize that, like, a lot of people act like, go to therapy, you're going to get better. And it's just like, healing is your responsibility.
that's
And
100%.
you can have a million and one resources around you, but at the end of the day, if you don't take responsibility for your own BS, and like, it's not BS because here I go, like, I'm blaming myself or whatever. If you don't take responsibility for the things that you know you've been through, then
Yeah,
you're never gonna like be able to try to heal. And they also say that healing isn't linear, right? So like,
yeah,
maybe we'll have a good couple years and then go back down and then go back up or
yeah,
whatever. But it's definitely super refreshing to talk to a sibling specifically who, like, has is actively, like, feels those moments, those triggers kind of come up, and then you are like, "Oh, wait, why do I feel this way?" Because I do, like, my therapist, Shimmy, she's my person, like, my advocate.
yeah,
Like, when I'm not in a relationship, I'm able to pull up those little things about, "Oh, wait, what
yeah.
is this? Why do I feel this way?" And then I'll get into something and then I lose myself. And it's like,
Mm,
but now I'm starting to realize, like, no, like, you have to be dedicated to yourself. Like, maybe if I put as much care and as much, like, if I give myself the amount of responsibility in my head as I think I have, that I need to take care of my brothers for the rest of my life,
yeah,
if I, like, cared about myself that much too, like, I need to take care of myself for the rest of my life too. Like,
yeah,
maybe that'll help.
yeah. And it's yeah, it's definitely it's all the things you said, right? It's hard, it's all these things. And I will say, like, the one of the things which I think having your group of friends who are helping like
Yeah,
with your self-worth, right? Like, I will say that is part of it. Like, when I first started going therapy, it was like, oh, okay, that's cool, right? Like, I have things,
yeah,
but when I really hit certain points in time and like instances of whatever it was, like your wall, right? Like, I was like, I like I am better than this.
yeah,
Right, like
yeah, exactly.
and everyone has to hit their own wall to hit it, and on some level, like, maybe it's good you hit the wall because at least if you hit
You
it, and you're like,
have to,
okay,
you have
like,
to. Yeah,
yeah, and it's definitely like having your own, like believing in myself was so hard. It's still hard, but like I
yeah,
much improved them from, like, if you had talked to like the pre therapy version of me, or even just pre anything, like 20 years old, right? Like,
yeah.
the amount of like what you were saying, like self degrading, self blame, finger
Yes.
pointing, whatever, at myself for things that were literally had nothing to do with me. I would
Yep.
apologize for
Oh my
crap
god.
that has absolutely nothing to do with anything other than like a coincidence that we happen to stand there. Right? I didn't do anything, right, but untraining yourself from that to
Yeah.
believing you have worth in general is already hard.
Yeah,
Now we're
yeah,
going from you have worth, now we're going to improve it by doing all these other continually hard things, by validating your feelings, acknowledging, and
yep,
like being self, right? Like, there's these big things where I found that, like, it is, like, as hard as what I'm doing is now, like, but because I start to believe in myself,
yeah.
that's what, like, kind of like helped, let's not cascade. There's a catalyst in it. There we go. That's
Yes,
the word.
yes,
Yeah,
exactly,
and
exactly.
and the yeah, and it's nice that, because at least, like, for as long as you've been in therapy, at least you're aware of the tools. Because at least the
Oh,
more that
yeah.
you're aware, because you're familiar
Takes
with, like,
time.
oh, they can kick in fast versus Oh, I just don't know. I mean, and so I
Yeah.
don't know. Shit happens. It's hard
Yeah.
being a
Well, like
sim.
that's
It's
it. When
hard being in
you
the world. Like
when you said
it's
before, like you hit the wall, like I had a thought, like I'm sure I'm gonna hit many more walls
yeah.
like in the
You
future, but
you
like the
yeah.
biggest thing is like forcing forcing ourselves to put ourselves first.
Yes, and that in itself, with or without therapy, with or without anything help, it's just
You
it's
have to.
very difficult.
It's so hard. That's what
yeah.
that's what the lesson is. It's just you have to
Yeah.
like I will not like I won't cook for myself. I won't make myself like you know what I mean? Like
Yeah. I won't do that either. I get it.
someone will sleep over and I'm like, "Hell yeah. Want to make a big breakfast,
mhm.
pancakes." I'm up an hour before them. I'm making them coffee or I'm in a relationship and my boyfriend's snoring and I wake up cuz I want to make him coffee. I'm not in a relationship and I will sit in bed and I will starve myself until 1 in the afternoon. Like, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
like it's just caretaking. You only want to take care of others. And it's like, nope, you deserve to be taken care of and by yourself, you know?
Yeah.
So that's what I'm learning. Do you want to send me an invoice for this therapy
Yeah.
session? I'll give you my
well,
address.
yeah, right. Yeah. It's
Do
but it
you
was
take
good.
United Healthcare is what
Right.
I'm wondering. Because, it's expensive out here in New
yeah,
York
oh no,
City.
it is.
So,
Yeah, but prioritizing ourselves, whether it's like budget wise, time wise, mental, right? Just mentally, like you're just gonna take 5 minutes just to like breathe. Like
yeah.
it's all of it's important.
This has
Um.
been very, very refreshing for me, though. This
Yeah.
is the first
Oh, I'm
conversation I've
glad.
had with a sibling, like literally ever.
Is
Like
it like
any, like no, I've talked to siblings before. Like, let
well?
me not be
I'm
stupid, but
yeah.
I've only been in I've been on panels. Like every time I
oh,
talk
okay.
to siblings, I feel like I'm on display. I feel like this is the girl with the three brothers. Like like
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
I feel like a figure. I've always been talking as an advocate. I've never had just a one-on-one casual conversation of wow, you've been through the same shit that I have been through
Yeah.
and we come from totally different lives, so totally different cultures, totally different ends of the world and
Yeah.
it's like really refreshing and nice to just hear it from somebody
Yeah.
else,
I'm
you know?
glad.
So
Yeah.
I appreciate you sharing and inviting me to do this.
Yeah. Thanks for joining us.
I'm like
It's
I'm
yeah.
like I'm like should I be I'm like like my tone is wrapping it up, which this is not my podcast. I need to shut up, but
Yeah.
I just wanted you to know that this has been very oh, I feel better. I feel good.
Yeah.
I
I'm
needed this.
glad. Oh no, and that's one of the things that I think is great. Like, is when you talk to other sibs, it's so easy. Like, I feel like no hindrance to jump from like really funny, like we were clearly laughing about a variety of things, right, to really hard stuff because it's so like it's so easy to like I'm like gesturing and not that anyone can see this other than you.
Yeah,
like
yeah, I
yeah,
know,
but
save.
yeah, but it's so
It's
easy and
duality.
yeah, and I'm so thankful that like people are willing to like just share like about their lives, and then that's one of the things that I'm like I love talking to people, so I'm like might as well just talk to Sims and record it, and
Yeah.
it just
Yeah.
makes the world go round because it's just like we have such like great stories and we're such great people and it's like
Yeah.
people are missing out on like the real us, right? Like what you
Yeah,
shared with me, that's the
exactly.
real you, right? Like
Well,
there's a
that's the
panel version of you that's real, but like this is
exactly.
Allie, right?
This
And
is me.
that's
Yeah.
yeah.
That's the whole reason I wrote this book too, was because I
Yeah.
feel like the only conversation I ever had about my life and my siblings was focused around the logistics and the boys.
Yeah.
And Allie as a sister, the story has never been about me. And it's
Yeah.
never been about how I was affected. So I sent you the book. It's in the mail. I'm going to send you the tracking.
Okay.
Um, after this, I almost think that we should have a follow up conversation after you read it, whenever that happens,
Oh, yeah,
because
yeah.
I just feel like there might be just more in just actual stories for us to talk about. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
I felt like after I watched the TED Talk on Glass Children, I wanted to talk to a sibling because I was like, "Whoa, hello,
Yeah.
this is my story. You just said it to me." And I just, I'm interested because I've had more parents um of disabled kids read it than siblings. I haven't had a
Yeah.
conversation with a sibling post reading it yet. So I'm
Oh,
definitely
okay.
interested. I'm interested to see how you feel
Yeah, and it'll be
after,
fun
if
because I've
you
also
know
met you before, so it'll be a
exactly.
good like, hey, like
Well, you'll
that's
hear me too. One thing
yeah,
I'm getting a lot is that, like, from people that don't know me even, like, that they can, when they're reading it, they hear my voice because I'm a New York girl. I have a very,
yeah,
very, very, very unique tone of TOV, and tone of voice isn't
yeah.
necessarily like diction. It's just the way
No,
I
but that
speak.
yeah, and it's like, but it's not. Yeah, the thing that I found is that there's an increasing number of people that have published books post 2020 that are sibs about some form of being a sib, whether
Yeah,
it's like their
totally,
own personal story or something um tangentially related. So it's
totally.
yeah, it'll be exciting because then what I'm hoping to is like so yeah, as I'm talking to people who've written books, I'm like, here everyone read more, like here's more books for everyone just to like share
Yeah,
the
yeah,
love of
yeah. Of
like of just hearing more of like everyone's personal story and everything. So
course.
it'll be fun. Um are there any words of encouragement that you would like to I mean we've talked about lots of things, but do you have any
Yeah.
like,
What? Oh,
top whatever number list of encouragement you would like to give to fellow
girl.
Sims?
Girl, I got words of encouragement.
Great.
Um, I think my words of encouragement, I don't want it to be corny. I think so it's gonna sound a little negative probably coming off first, but I'll bring it back up. Like,
Okay.
I like I know what it's like to have someone reach out to you and be like, "Oh, you should go to this support group," or you should, "Oh, I know somebody that has an autistic brother. You should talk to them," or you should whatever. Like, it's a lonely journey that only you can get yourself to. I think,
Mhm.
like, your parents can't force you to go to therapy.
Right.
You're, especially when you're a kid, you don't want to. Like, I wanted to be with my friends. I wanted to be as normal as I could.
Mhm.
The one thing I will say is that you're not alone, I guess. Like,
Yeah.
there are so many people that feel what we feel, and they don't even necessarily have to have our family situation. There are so many people that go through
Mhm.
other things, and I think, like, our situation is almost a blessing because it kind of forces you to be real and honest and raw with this world. And I think, like, as time goes on, this world becomes more superficial and more fake and more about
Mhm.
appearances, and I think we need more people like us, like more people who are willing to be honest and show the whole story, and say, like, there's no shame in being depressed. There's no shame in, like, I like to say duality a lot because, like,
Yeah.
I don't want to be looked at as a victim. I don't want to be looked at as the depressed girl, but I also don't want to just be looked at as the hot girl or the
Right.
popular, the funny girl. Like,
Yeah.
you can be the two things at once. Like, it's okay to be, like, happy on social media and posting selfies of yourself, and then the next day to, like, be really honest about the fact that you're sad. Like,
Yeah.
I think, like, my words of encouragement is, like, the realer you are with yourself and everyone around you, the realer
Mhm.
everyone around you will be with you. And, like,
Yeah.
that's not always the case. You'll, like, definitely run into, I'm finding that, like, my heart leads me to a lot of people that aren't the best people because
Mhm.
they see I'm compassionate and whatever, but there's also the strong side of that. Like,
Yeah.
there's just good that there, like, I feel I'd rather be a good person and get taken advantage of than be angry and be bitter, or,
Mm.
like, I think, like, what are my words of encouragement is to just, like, don't, when you want to go inside and isolate, try not to, like, try to find a way to connect, and even if it's not with somebody in our community, find something to connect to, like your community. Like, I feel so connected to where I live in Brooklyn, my little neighborhood. And it's
Yeah.
not even that I don't even have any friends in this town, but I have my restaurants that I go, and like in the last few years, like I go to my Pilates studio, like the people that work at the restaurants all live in
Mm.
town. Like people say hi to me on the street now. Like,
Yeah.
find your own identity. Like, maybe that's the word of encouragement, is find something for you.
Yeah.
Find something for you that is only for you. Like like I got my cat when I was in college, like, and I thought like that was the first thing I got that was like
Yeah.
for me and only for me. And like I wasn't supposed to get him because my mom was allergic and the boys are terrified. And
Yeah.
I did it
Yeah.
anyway,
Yeah.
but like, yeah, I guess it's just like, do find something out there that's find someone or something out there that's your advocate, that's just for you. Whether that's a therapist or an activity or a place or,
Yeah.
you know, just something that you can kind of come home to. That's it. Something you
Yeah.
can come home to.
Awesome. Yeah, and that makes you feel like you're at home.
Yep,
Yeah.
exactly.
Cool.
Exactly.
Awesome.
That's what I
Well,
got.
yeah, that works for me.
Love it.
It's a
Love
good
it.
summary. Yeah. Cool. Well, thanks for being on the podcast. I'm sure you will be back
Thank you.
and
Thank you
it'll
for
be fun.
having
Yeah.
me. This is so much fun.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Special Needs Sibling Podcast. If you're new here, please subscribe, rate, and review the show to help more siblings and friends find us. You can also support the podcast by donating on Ko-fi. That's Ko-fi. You can check out the link in the description for more info. If you're a special needs sibling, I hope you feel encouraged and validated in your journey. If you're not a sibling but know someone who is, I hope you learned a little bit more about what their life is like. That's all for now, and until next time, this is the Special Needs Sibling Podcast.